Hello again, Lisa.
Hi Ruth, how are
Ah,
you doing?
good. Yes. How are you today?
I am well. I'm alive.
Measured response. Alive, yes.
Yes, I've made another day. So yeah, that's a bonus.
It is. Um, we are gathered together again with the technology of Zoom to
Yeah.
have another East Rocks conversation. And
Yeah.
we've been chatting, haven't we, this week about what would be a most kind of interesting for us to talk about, which is always a
Yes.
good kind of indicator of hopefully what might be interesting to hear about us talk about.
Yeah.
Um, And before we go any further on, I should introduce myself. I always forget this bit. So I'm Ruth Coates, and I am a psychotherapist based in East Lothian and a member of Go Train East Rocks.
Yes. And I am a coach at Go Train East
Okay,
Rocks and also owner of Super Being.
excellent. And today we thought we'd have a chat about podcasts
Yes.
because I think more and more people are getting into it, into listening to podcasts. And maybe I've been quite late to the bandwagon, actually. I just started getting into it over the last year or two. And we thought it's maybe quite a good time for that in terms of um, people maybe wanting to hear more about other people's stories and maybe an opportunity for learning and development just now.
Yeah. Or
Um,
zoning out.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, bit of escapism. And there are so many
Yeah.
different podcasts out there that we thought we would just talk about the ones that we find inspiring
Yes.
and see where we go.
Yeah. And I think as well, I think as we, when we were talking about this, is that a podcast appeals to wherever sometimes you're at, whatever you feel the need for, and it pops up and you go, oh, I'll maybe have a listen to this because
Yeah,
generally it's quite beneficial. It's what you need to hear
yeah.
sometimes at
And I
that
think
time.
there's a sea of podcasts out there, just like there's a sea of, whole sorts of TV programs and stuff. And
Yeah.
often it's by talking about them, what inspires us, and having a wee recommendation that we get a feel for, what's out
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
you're right. I think that what we're attracted to in a podcast is maybe what we need a bit of,
Totally.
whether that's a bit of
Totally.
comedy or a bit of kind of
Yeah.
documentary or, like
Yeah.
I say, hearing someone's story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what place do podcasts have in your life, Lisa?
Oh, well, lately, if I'm honest, they haven't. They haven't really featured, I suppose, because I haven't really found the space. So normally I would tend to walk the dog, or I'd have it on in the house. So I play it through my phone and through my speaker in the
Okay.
house.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing something that isn't taxing my brain, that enables me to engage and do whatever I'm doing. So like
Mhm.
laundry or something mundane,
Yeah.
but it's a chore that needs done. I love hearing it then, or when I walk my dog. But generally, the dog's not that keen. So when the earphones go in, he's just like, okay, right,
Oh,
whatever.
your dog's human
So,
though.
he is. He's a bit kind of like, oh, that's so rude. So he's it's not all. It doesn't always work. It depends on where we go. If he's needing interaction, then it's not ideal. But yeah, so that's kind of, and I am a massively late comer to the old podcast, like really late. Uh, I think I've only kind of maybe the last 8 9 months
Okay.
started listening to some
Yeah.
things that have maybe appealed to me, or someone saying, have you heard this podcast? No. But
Mm,
I'll go and look it up and I'll have a listen. So
yeah.
that's basically how I've come to it. And those are when I would maybe listen to it. I don't know, what about you? How are your listening habits?
I usually, yeah, I listen on a dog walk sometimes, but mainly not in the house actually. I kind
Right.
of move with it. I kind of travel with it. It's a portable thing. So it's usually on my walk to work, wherever that might be in Edinburgh or around East Lothian, or on a drive.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I
that's a good
find
place.
myself getting really absorbed in them to the point where
Mm.
if I agree with something, I'm like, yes. I feel like I'm kind of living it, the conversation.
Yeah.
So I find them really absorbing. And if I find the good one that matches what I need that day, so I have a wee kind of library, I suppose, of stuff that is about training and development,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
around mental health and well-being, stuff that might be more lighthearted, you know, maybe kind of
Mm-hmm.
celebrity interviews or something like that.
Yeah.
And then others that may be more science-based,
Yeah.
documentary-based.
Yeah.
So it can change what it is I'm
Yeah.
kind of interested in, but
Yeah.
I've got my favorites for
Oh,
sure.
good. I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear those.
And you've got one as well that you.
I've got a couple. Mine
Uh-huh.
are, because I'm still very new to this. I have found a couple, obviously, that I needed to hear, and that appealed to me. And the one of them was called the Relationship Series. So it you can find it on however you listen to your podcasts. I know there's plenty of apps for that, and I think mine was just on my phone, so it's the Apple one, I think. But yeah, so it's called the Relationship Series, and this one was just entitled State of Mind.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, okay. So here I am, and I remember the day. It was quite a cold day, and I didn't take the dog with me, and I wrapped up and stuck my headphones in and went for a big beach walk.
Oh, lovely.
And it was lovely, because I was feeling either irritable, ratty. I remember just thinking, God, Lisa, you know, you really need to work this stuff out, because you know, it's all here and all here.
So you did
And
something
so
really
yeah,
proactive then.
yeah, I really did, because
Yeah.
it wasn't just accidental. I wanted to get a bit of insight into this, how I was being in that moment, which I was very uncomfortable with. So anyway, so this came up for me, and it was basically a podcast, and the lady who was being interviewed is a lady called Denise Holland, who's was a netball coach, netball international player, and then coach. And now she has, I think, like a high performance website to help athletes, high performance athletes,
Wow.
and their mental health. So I listened to this anyway, and it was just fantastic because I could resonate with it. It was just basically her chatting about how, I think at the beginning of her career, that she spent an awful lot of time in her head, and that when she wasn't very conscious or aware of where she was at in any given situation. So if a situation arose where it made her, it caused frustration in her body, her reaction would have been, so it was a reaction, that it had to be someone else's fault. They caused it.
Okay, yeah.
Their
It was out
behavior.
there. It was out there. Yeah.
Nothing to do with her, but not as naive as that either. You know, she wasn't naive or ignorant enough to say it's not my fault. Yeah, I'll have a part in this, but if you hadn't have said what you said, then that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So it was this constant, I think, internal dialogue with herself, of thinking that her whole life was dictated by what others' behavior.
So how did that affect you then, listening to that? You said that it was a kind of meant, you know, for you to kind of choose that one.
So I think for me, I am quite a reactive human being. I think I react. Well, less so now, but I take less time, and it can only be a split second or 10 seconds to just go, what is going on here?
That's
like
about
say the
getting
kids,
back into your body somehow, getting
totally back to self, because all of this is generally not you. It's not your inner wisdom. It's your ego, or it's your head space. It's you're allowing everything that's going on out there affect what's happening.
More reactive. Yeah. Which we need to be forgiving of and compassionate about, but it's about I think you used the metaphor before about I loved it.
The train.
Yeah.
That was stolen from a lovely friend of mine, and I was just like, she said, "Oh, you're on the train, Lisa. You're on the train."
And you need to be
on the platform.
I really like that.
I loved it too, because I could see it immediately. You're on the platform watching the train going, and and you're just kind of like, shit.
Yeah.
So but I spend a majority, and I think probably we all do, because I don't think this is like learning something like how we talked about last week about our neurological pathways. You don't learn this stuff and you've got it. and you never go back to being on the train
Oh,
again.
absolutely. Really good point. Yeah, yeah. It's more
So,
about recognizing when you're back on the train
yes,
more quickly, more readily,
yes,
and then
yes,
choosing to, I love that metaphor, to be on the platform again for a while,
yes, yes, just for a while.
bit of
You will,
realism there.
and yeah, invariably hop back on the
Yeah.
train, because it just takes anything,
Yeah.
anything.
So that sounds like that podcast was what you needed to listen to in that moment, and it maybe brought you something on that walk as
Bit of
well.
clarity, yeah, but
Yeah, and it's
and yeah.
obviously had an impact.
Yes, I am much more I'm much more aware, which brings me into a higher state of consciousness, I suppose, which
Mm.
I think for us all is a good thing.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
great.
So yeah. Go on then, give us one of yours. Lighten us all up, for God's
Well, I don't know
sake.
about that. Oh no, I thought that was fine. Yeah, neither of ours are kind of, well, in the comedy vein, but the guy that I'm going to talk about was a comedian, and I guess he still has his funny side. It's actually Russell Brand,
Yes.
which is a bit like Marmite for some people, isn't it? You either love him or hate him, and I do
Yeah.
love him.
Yeah.
A little crush on Russell, have I?
Oh.
But no, I just think he's so well, really impassioned and eloquent about how he speaks, and he's obviously got a very unique mind
Mm-hmm.
and quite intellectual. But he has a
Mm.
very, for me anyway, a very kind of accessible way of kind of reaching that kind of
Yeah.
chat, that kind of conversation. And the guest that he's had on his podcast, and I cannot remember what his podcast's called. Just all of a sudden, Under the Skin.
Under the Skin.
So it's on the Luminary platform now. It's
Yeah.
moved over, but he still has things available on Spotify and stuff occasionally. But you'd have to pay for the Luminary ones, I think. But I've never have. I've just got the ones on Spotify. So Brené Brown, the interview that he had with Brené Brown, who is, I can't remember what her title is, what she calls herself. She's a researcher, isn't she?
Yeah.
You know Brené Brown as well.
Yeah. Read quite a
Um,
few of her books.
yeah, she's an author. She kind of shot to fame, a really unwelcome kind of fame for her at the time, with her TED talk
That's right.
about vulnerability and her
Yeah.
research into that quality of vulnerability. Um, and this is what her talk on Russell Brand is about. It's about vulnerability and power. And I have listened to it maybe about 4 times now, I think, because there's something different I get from it every single time. And I also just like revisiting the light bulb moments and going, oh yeah, that makes sense. And of course,
Yeah.
just that really recognizing bits of myself in that, bits of other people in my relationships with them. And it's really meaningful to me because I know of my pattern about vulnerability and courage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
taking that risk to be seen, to be known, to be authentic, and you might risk a lot in that, in well, you might risk maybe feeling rejected
Yeah.
or not getting what you need, but actually in being authentic, that's where the real strength is, and being vulnerable. So she just talks about that so easily and so in a non-heavy way,
Yeah.
because she herself is quite funny, is just really genuine, and they have a lovely relationship as well going on this. I don't think they've ever met before. They really didn't. She really didn't know much about him, I don't think. But there's a real nice chemistry between them in this
Yeah.
podcast. So it's just a really pleasant listen.
Yeah.
And I'd also just, if you haven't seen Brené Brown's TED Talk on vulnerability, Google it. I mean, it's had millions of views, and it's inspirational.
Hugely inspirational.
Yeah.
And I think what I've heard that one too, and what I loved about both of them was that they just got each other.
Yeah.
Like they really did. It's not often you hear, and I know theirs was more of a conversation. It wasn't an interview, but it was just phenomenally connected.
Yeah.
They laughed hard. They were serious. It's just, I thought, I wasn't sure because that was my first ever experience of Russell Brand in that place. And it was actually a really pleasant surprise.
Yeah. And I think
It was unexpected.
in fact, you nailed it there. I think a lot of his podcasts aren't really interviews. They're about that kind of genuine interest in each other. It's a really easy conversation, I think. But yeah, she also talks about, and in her other stuff, about empathy and compassion as well. these really human qualities that we maybe don't quite get to grips with, but actually if we can learn a bit more about them. I mean, for me, her work has had a huge impact on me personally and my work.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But I think it's all we
yeah.
maybe don't understand the power of them.
Yeah.
You know, they have huge power. Vulnerability, empathy, honesty. And I found that was so much in their podcast,
Yeah.
how empathetic they were, how honest and open. So it was like two mates literally having a coffee and a chinwag
Yeah.
in a cafe. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah,
So it
and
was
you
fab.
feel really kind of lucky to be part of it. That's a good podcast is like, oh, I feel really privileged. So the other guest that I just wanted to mention that I've really enjoyed of his, one has been Wim Hof, and he's been on again recently. Yeah, the Iceman.
Yes.
So he's all about the kind of cold water therapy, isn't he? And breathing patterns. I mean, that's really simplifying who he is and what he does.
I know.
Recently, and it's one of my kind of listen list, is he's done a kind of coronavirus survival guide, you know, for using the techniques that he's talked about for years in this time to really support ourselves. So that's on my list of things to listen to.
Yeah, fantastic. Because I think his Wim Hof method was born out of his wife dying and his ability to cope. So yeah, and I think it was very much a self-taught thing. But now I think scientifically it's proven to be amazing.
Yeah,
an amazing therapy to do for anything. And I suppose, I think any form of breathing is probably super helpful.
Yeah.
Not least keeping us alive, but you know what I mean in the therapeutic sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And soothing the system. We talked a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And that's what he's all about. So that's one to listen to for me. But
yes.
I think it's Vim.
Oh, is it? Did I say Wim?
I don't know. Bowie.
Just on a postcard. Oh, sorry.
No, I don't know. I've probably got it wrong.
It was like two people I worked with one person. She was called God, I've totally forgotten her name. Her name was Anna, and she was getting married to Jen. Anyway, she sent out the invite, and I said, that's really cool. This is years ago when I first started at BBC. I said, God, that's really cool. Very modern, you know, two girls getting married. Wow, it's exciting. And so this was in my head. I was absolutely convinced of it. And then I'd said to her, I said, this is really cool. This is so cool that you're so cool with this. I love it. And she said, what do you mean? And she said, getting married. She said, everybody does that, Lisa. And I said, no, but you're getting married to a woman, and it's a big invite and it's wonderful. And she said, am I? And I said, well, Jen. And she went, Yen.
Yen. Knew it.
So I've got history. Sorry, I
have. So do you have any other gems just to kind of
well, again it's all mindfulness for me, and that's obviously where I'm at right now. But Eckhart Tolle, whose books are really good, The Power of Now, and he's an interesting man. He's an interesting looking kind of guy as well, but if you can get past all that, what he has to say is absolutely amazing. But he was talking about, you know, this it was on the whole COVID-19 as well, just about it being a collective adversity, and that we should allow ourselves to go deeper into our space, you know, into yourself, so that you don't suffer unnecessarily. And I think that's really cool. So that's employing all of your techniques, or laughter, and, you know, listening to something that's nourishing and gives you either a giggle or helps you think better, gives you more clarity. And it was just about, you know, to take the opportunity to be in control of being present. Because when we can control. Totally. And we can't control anything out there, because when we go into that, we step into the fear. Well, for one, we can't control it. For two, it doesn't actually exist. And it's not real time happening. And it's to manage that. And I think that's what we're all guilty of, because you living in the future. And but there's no space for that here.
Presently. Again, that's a practice, isn't it? That's a practice. We're pulled to the past and the future, but we can practice being more in the present.
Here.
Yeah,
That's
and
it.
he's great
That's
for that. He's the master of that, isn't he?
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So that he's very interesting. That wasn't a podcast though. That was more of a YouTube video.
So you can find that on YouTube.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the only other one that I've been listening to, and it's the only one, but he's also got fantastic guests, is it's called Broken Brain, Dr. Drew. And again, that's on Spotify. And he recently had a guest on his show. Oh, I can't remember her name, but it was you'd be able to look it up. But she's an Alzheimer's researcher, and she specifically looks at the correlation between women's health and dementia, and that's got personal interest for me and kind of my family history. But I also just found it fascinating from a kind of health equalities point of view, in how women's brains have been assumed to be the same as men's brains, and that's affected how we're treated medically, even the kind of dosage and sleeping pills and things like that, and how we're treated through all the life stages as well, including menopause. So I just found it fascinating, and actually it was so much more hopeful than it sounds.
Yeah,
it's quite a long one. It was over an hour and a half, but I broke it down actually, and it's really interesting stuff. She's a really inspirational woman.
Wow,
so
that does sound interesting, really interesting as a woman. But I think that's also good to say that with all of these podcasts, because you might look at it and go, oh my God, it's an hour and a half, or it's nearly 2 hours long. You can break it down, and some of them do give you kind of little in minutes X to Y. We talk about this, which I think is really helpful.
Yeah.
Because then you can tune into what really interests you too.
Yeah, absolutely. The bits that really,
yeah.
So we are really hoping that with sharing a couple of our favourites, that other people might see this and then leave a comment with their favourite podcast as well, whatever kind of genre they're from, whether they're funny, serious, interesting, inspirational. I'm always up for a new recommendation.
Yeah, me too. This has fired me up now to maybe just take a wee bit of time, maybe switch in one of my Netflix or whatever I happen to be watching, and maybe switch it and just have a listen instead.
What change gear in the evenings maybe, like that. That
just
think
good. That sounds really inviting to me, to just sit down, hopefully after the kids have gone to bed, if you've got anything left, and just have a wee seat on a chair. So maybe not take it to bed, because I will be out like a light, but sit just in a chair, nice lighting, and just have a listen and be part of something.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah.
Let's try and do that. And so please let us know your suggestions. And also next time, Lisa, I was thinking about maybe we could talk about something similar, like what book you're reading at the moment, and I've got one in mind already actually.
Let's do that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'm up for that. Right, so maybe books in at the ready.
Yeah. Get reading.
There you go. Podcasts and books.
Yeah. Brilliant. Lovely to see you, Lisa.
Lovely to see you too.
See you next time.
Bye. Bye-bye.